about this?
These two people.
I am geeking out
to the Geeks Unleashed podcast.
Mark!
Jasmine!
What a nerd.
Nerd alert!
Unleashed television.
What are you talking about?
Anything can be a podcast.
Video game.
What is a geek?
Oh, hi, Mark. The whole point is, of course, the plot is...
You guys have great conversation.
I am geeking out.
Unleashed! Movies! People love movies!
All right, you guys, podcast time.
You're listening to the Geeks Unleashed podcast. Part of the Family Badass, we take our passions and our fandoms and we turn them into conversations with you.
You just have to press OK. Hello, welcome to Geeks Unleashed. It's episode 155. I'm Mark.
I'm Jasmine.
And this week we're joined by Phable and Lynk. Say hello, guys.
Hello.
Peace. So Phable and Lynk are part of our PCP Bad Batch Army. Phable, do you want to tell us quickly about your show?
I do a show called Blame Phable and His Amazing Friends with my co-host Nick Comic Culture and Dr. Doom's Fan Club. We come on every Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, and it's basically a show where we go over pop culture news and topics of the week, whatever the hottest thing people are talking about in the comic book community. And at the end of the show, we do something called the blaming, where we basically do a show and tell, but we call it the blaming because you might blame one of us for that next purchase you make after seeing some of the stuff we show off. So yeah, it's just a cool little show we do every Friday night. And of course, I got the Instagram where I hang out with a bunch of community members and we do cool things like hashtag Figgy Friday and hashtag Throw Your Sets Up Saturday. And yeah, I do a lot of interactions there. So yeah, man, that's what I do.
That's awesome. You come on before, I think it was it A Quiet Place? Was it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. It's been about two or something years.
It's been a while,
Yeah. And as people may remember, we met up almost 2 years ago in person as well. And Link, what's the show that you're involved in?
Oh, we're going back to Wednesdays. I was gonna say Tuesdays, but every Wednesday, 9:30, I think it's the time we're sticking with. I do a show called Supreme Clientele on YouTube. Dr. Doom's Fan Club is the brother I do the show with, and we just geek out about comics. Usually we kind of, we'll pick like 3 books that have come out from the previous week and we'll kind of give our thoughts on them. But lately we've been going over like certain storylines or certain eras, and we covered like the early 2000s of Marvel's era. So that was really, pretty much just geeking out about comics and our love for them, and hopefully trying to give some information along the way, to make it entertaining for the viewer. But yeah. No,
amazing. And obviously you've actually, this is the first time you've come on to do a movie review of us. You've done a few graphic novels of us now.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for coming on. So we'll kick into our intro part. So each week on the Geeks and Niche podcast, we catch you up in our pop culture lives and we bring you a review of something adapted from the comic book or gaming world.
Yep. And before we get started, if you're watching on YouTube, thank you so much. We appreciate that. We'd also love it if you would like this video and subscribe to our channel. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, we appreciate that as well. We'd also love it if you would leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Podchaser.
Please also feel free to donate to our Ko-Fi. All funds are appreciated.
Because comics ain't cheap.
We're not going to do a Geek of the Week this week. There's 4 of us on here and might be too much to talk about. So we're going to jump straight into our movie review. And it's Generation X from 1996, the TV movie, which was directed by Jack Shoulder. Think Without You, right? Screenplay and story was by Eric Blackney, and he's based on characters from Generation X comic from Marvel Comics, which was created by Scott Lobdell and Chris Bachalo.
And it stars Matt Pure as Russell Tresh, Finola Hughes as Emma Frost, Jeremy Ratchford as Sean Cassidy, Amaryllis as M. Her name was way too long, so I just shortened it to M. Heather McCombs as Jubilee, Bumper Robinson as Mondo, Austin Rodriguez as Angelo, Suzanne Davis as Buff, and Randall Slavin as Kurt.
So the first appearances of these characters. So Generation X debuted as a team during the 1994 Phalanx, I think that's how you say it, Covenant storyline, which appeared in a monthly series, and then they appeared in their own monthly series in September 1994. Generation X issue 1 was dated November 1994, and the characters had various appearances before they were in the book. So Emma Frost debuted in Uncanny X-Men 129, which came out in January 1980 by Chris Claremont and John Bryan. Sean Cassidy debuted in X-Men 28 all the way back in January 1967 by Roy Thomas and Werner Roth. Jubilee was in Uncanny X-Men 244, which came out in May 1989 by Chris Claremont and Mark Silvestri. And then the 3 comic book Generation X characters came out fairly similar times. So that was M from Uncanny X-Men 316 by Scott Lobdell and Chris Bachalo. Skin was the following issue in Uncanny X-Men 317 by Scott Lobdell and Joe, I don't know how you say his surname, Mad something or other. And then Mondo appeared in the main Generation X title, issue 3 by Scott Lobdell and Chris Bachalo. And unfortunately, most of the other Generation X characters didn't make their way to the movie, which we'll discuss as we're going along. This was released 20th of February 1996, running time of 87 minutes with a crazy budget of $4 million US.
It shows.
Never released at the box office, but it was released straight to TV. So
I think this might be the first like official TV movie, like straight to TV movie that we've covered. The other ones were meant to be theatrical and then were not released theatrically.
So this was meant to be a TV series.
Yeah, it was supposed to be a pilot, and that did not work out.
So.
All right, so instead of fun facts this week, we're going to do trivia. I'm quizzing all of y'all on your Generation X knowledge. Okay, so this was confusing, and I guess they changed it for the movie from what is happening in the comics, but Generation X did not actually attend Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters, as the movie suggests they did. Where did they go instead? What was the name of the school that Generation X attended instead of Xavier's?
It was outside.
Xavier School for Higher Learning or something like that?
No.
No, I remember it was the old Hellion School.
It
was.
Well,
it
I'm looking for a
Emma.
specific name.
Oh, no, it was in New York.
No, that's true. It was not in New York. They were in a completely different state.
It was Boston, Massachusetts. I know that.
Yes, it was in Massachusetts. But do you know the name of the school?
No.
It's called the Massachusetts Academy.
Oh.
Still affiliated, obviously, with Professor Xavier and all that stuff. But like,
I think it was Emma Frost's old school for her Hellions team.
Yeah,
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, so they changed that in the film. In the film, they go to Xavier's, but in the comics, they originally went to a different school. All right. So in the film, we have several mutants, including 2 brand new characters that were created for the film. But a lot of the Generation X folks are notably missing. Can you name any of the members of Generation X that did not actually appear in the film?
Chamber, Sync, M-Plate.
Links on a roll. Links on a roll.
Penance wasn't in there.
Yeah.
Penance. Yeah, that was such a.
You got most of them.
Yeah. So can you also name the 2 that were created for the film?
The Cyclops one and the bad guy.
Yeah, Buff
and the which one?
The bad guy.
No. Well, I mean, yes, the bad guy, but no, that.
Scott Summers wannabe.
I know.
Come on, everybody else was an actual member.
Buff was.
Buff.
So.
That was yeah. Dang, see, but I knew they were going. I know that was Husk or Paige. Visual over a different name. I forgot they called her Buff. Dang it.
All right.
What are you doing?
You were close. You got a lot. There was I don't know, 15 or so different characters that were all part of Generation X at some point. Obviously, because of this $4 million TV budget, Most of the characters could not be in here. Chamber being the main one because half of his body is like would have to have been CGI, and they just did not have the budget for that. So they left any of the heavy hitters out because they didn't have the CGI budget to make it work. All right, so what we were just talking about this earlier, but this was a TV film that Fox just was dead set on. This was going to turn into a TV series. And this is coming off of their X-Men series, the animated series that they had in 92. And they really thought like, oh man, we've hit the jackpot with this. This TV movie debuted so poorly. There were 108 different television programs that were rated that came out on that same Tuesday night. Where on that scale of 108 shows did this movie fall? Give me
180. 180.
Okay,
right?
Wait. Anybody else?
97.
97. All right, Phable, what you got?
100.
100. Okay, it was a little better than that. It tied for 72nd of all the other programs that came out on a Tuesday night. But because of that, Fox was like, "Yeah, okay, well, never mind. We're not gonna keep pushing this." Okay, so the filming location. We know that this was filmed at Hatley Castle, which is an actual place. And this same location was used in several of the other X-Men films and even in the Deadpool movie. So my question is, what other prominent television series has that castle been used for? I'll give you one more hint. They were both on the CW.
Supernatural?
Vampire Diaries?
No.
Something with vampires. I don't know. That's what CW has.
Superman. Smallville.
Yes.
Smallville.
Yes.
No.
Smallville is correct. It was the Luthor Mansion in Smallville.
No.
It was also Queen Manor in Green Arrow or Arrow. It's where the Queen stayed. So gets a lot of use, that little mansion. Okay, one more, my last trivia question. So the Dream Machine claw brain thing that they used as a prop in here, they recycled it and they used it as a prop in another television series. It's one Mark would probably know better than any of the rest of us, but what other TV series did they use that exact same prop in?
Quantum Leap.
No, but good guess.
Doctor Who?
Yes, Doctor.
Which one?
Who.
No way. Good shit.
Yes, it was a prop that was used in Doctor Who as well.
Oh wow, okay. That wasn't where I was thinking. Okay.
So that's listen, fun facts for this one were very sparse. Like not that much out there, so that's all I have for you guys.
I learned something though, so that's I'll take that.
I think Steph won that. I think he won.
Steph was on a roll on the mutants. But I would say it's a tie between Steph and Phable. I think it was a tie. Mark, come on, man, you got to do better for the podcast.
I only got that first one. The names, that's the only one I was really on the money with. The school thing that stopped the shit out of me because I was for sure going to be like the school gifted youngsters or something like that. Oh, that's crazy that they didn't go there in the comics. Maybe we had more of an impact on me than I realized because I follow the movie canon. That's wild.
So I was tempted to. Do you know what? In the comics, there's a sign here in the bottom corner of this issue here of the school. It does say Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters.
I don't know. The internet said something else.
Maybe they changed it. And I wouldn't be surprised because there were so many plot twists that went back and forth in that book. Right, on IMDb, they summarize this with 2 lines before we jump into our own thoughts on it. The new teenage students at a school for mutants, in brackets, normal-looking humans with fantastic powers, try to stop an evil scientist from controlling the world's dreams. Before we jump into what our sort of summary is on the movie, just thought it'd be interesting to find out what everyone's knowledge or sort of knowledge on, probably knowledge on Generation X, and if they had any before the movie, or but I think Jasmine's probably quite short.
None. Never, ever, ever heard of these people. Because like I said, my first introduction was X-Men, the 92 series.
Yeah.
None of these people were in that series. So I did not know. I mean, I knew Emma Frost. Outside of Emma Frost and the rare mention of Xavier, like I didn't know any of these other characters. And I kept trying so hard. I was like, I watched the New Mutants movie too, but like they're not in that. Like, I don't know any of these people. Like other than Emma Frost, I had no idea who anybody was.
You must have known Jubilee from the animated series, though.
Well, Jubilee, yeah. Also, that really pissed me off that they changed her ethnicity in this one. I don't like it when they take away a minority and make them white. I don't like that. Like I think that's an unfair way to do that kind of role switching. So I forget that Jubilee's in here because I was not happy with the Jubilee that was in here.
In the 90s, man, they were.
Link, what about you? What was your experience with Generation X?
I was aware of Generation X. I actually watched this. I remember I was at my uncle's house for winter break when this came out, and I begged him, because this was before the days of DVR, so you had to catch stuff on TV. I begged him to watch this movie. I just remember him being like, "Oh my God," throughout the whole movie, because he wasn't enjoying it. But I was excited to watch this. As a kid, I don't think I loved it, but I didn't think it was bad. It was just cool to see these characters I knew from a comic book I loved on screen, and to see, like, even though it was cheap as shit, it was cool to see their powers in a 3D aspect, I guess. So yeah, I was aware of the characters. As a kid, I was confused by the Cyclops dude. I knew everybody else, but the Cyclops dude, I was like, is he a new character I missed in the comics? Or like what's going on with him? The Diet Cyclops who didn't even have
Cyclops, no.
He just had the X-ray vision, man. He was such a waste. But yeah, I was familiar with this. I was excited to see it. And
did you read much of the comics? Did you read much of the series when it came out?
I had a few issues. Maybe I had issue 2 for it was like the first issue of Generation X I had for the longest time. I knew of Jubilee, I was following Uncanny X-Men, and I saw her leave that book, but I didn't know she was going to Generation X. So when I saw her in Generation X issue 2, I was like, oh snap, that's where she went. But yeah, I wasn't when the movie came out. I don't think they were too deep into their run. It was like what, 2 years into
yeah,
it?
I think it came out
because there's 94 and then 96.
Yeah, so I had like a handful of issues at that time, but I've always thought like the younger class of X-Men are really cool. Like I always thought New Mutants were cool. Generation X were the New Mutants of the 90s. So, I've always gravitated towards the younger class of X-Men, and that they were that for the 90s. So I just thought they were cool, to be honest. Chamber. He's the coolest looking dude there is, and he's nowhere to be found in this movie. So I think I was going to this movie hoping to see that, and it just never came. So yeah.
What about you, Phable? What was your knowledge before watching this movie?
I only read like the first issue of Generation X, to be honest with you. I mean, I was excited for it when it was coming out, because of what Link said. Like, New Mutants was my jam when I was collecting comic books, and when it turned into X-Force, sort of the young people, the young mutants sort of disappeared.
Yeah.
So when Generation X was coming out, I was super excited for it. But at the same time, that was around the time I was kind of getting priced out of comics. I wasn't collecting them as much. And Generation X is one of those things. I mean, it had that foil cover, I think, that first issue. Yeah. So it was a super expensive first issue. So I was kind of out at that point. But when the show got announced, I remember being excited for it because I knew what it was. Unlike a lot of people around me, they didn't know what the hell Generation X was, So I was excited for it, but I don't remember it, I know I watched it. I just don't remember any of it until I watched it today.
That's fair. Yeah, it's definitely it's easily forgettable.
Yep.
My experience is, I think, vastly different. I've got the whole run of the first volume, issues 1 to 75. I've got the 4 issues. So Generation X was launched in 1994, and 4 issues into its run, it got tied into the Age of Apocalypse storyline, and they flipped it where it became Generation Next. Chamber doesn't have his whole front lifted off. You know, he's got a face, and Generation Next actually was pretty cool. Mondo was in it, Shadowcat was in it, Colossus was in it, and they lived in like a castle or something. I came into comics around 94, and one of my friends who introduced me, Generation X was like one of his favorite books, and I can't remember how many issues it was into, maybe about 9 or 10 or something when I went in. So I really quickly went back and got the back issues and just carried on. I thought Generation X was amazing. I didn't really know, I never read an X-Men comic, and I just started watching the animated series. I'd more watched the Spider-Man animated series, and my familiarity, everyone knows Spider-Man, so that was much more my familiarity, and I didn't know that much about mutants at all. I started watching the X-Men animated series a little bit, and then I walked in, and obviously he introduced me to Generation X, and I carried on going, and that was like my favorite X title. And then underneath that, my second favorite X title was X Factor, but yeah, when I got into comics as well, it wasn't long into sort of the Onslaught saga, and I thought the whole X-Men world was like amazing. And I've got some of the figures as well. I've got M-Plate, I've got Jubilee. I can't remember now. I've got a couple of others.
Come on, man! And you didn't bring them for show and tell?
No. Maybe I'll try and throw them up on Instagram next week or something. But no, honestly, I was a huge Generation X fan, right? So I heard about this movie, and obviously, like Link was saying, it's before the age of digital, and before there was any decent internet. There was no Amazon. There was no way of me really being able to get a copy of this. And I remember like staying at a friend's house, and I was staying there for a weekend, a friend in London. And we went down to Blockbuster to go and hire a video, so we could watch a video at his house.
Oh, Blockbuster.
and I could not believe it. I'll tell you what, so he wasn't a comic fan at all. He like this guy, I remember his name's Simon. He's one of these pretty rigid, no humor guys. Like he's a policeman now, would you believe it? So I remember going into Blockbuster Video, and I saw Generation X on VHS on the shelf, and excitement popped out of me. I was like, no way. And I really wanted him to hire the film because it was his account, and we were obviously at his house. And he wouldn't do it. He's like, no, I'm not hiring that. And so we hired Heat instead. I can still remember that. And I think that was probably the better choice.
That is a much better choice. My God.
And especially when we got back, we watched it with his dad, and I think if we'd have made him watch Generation X, I probably would have got shot. So,
Mark, say real quick, it's really random, but I love the vernacular you use, because over here in the States we say rent.
Yes, and he says higher.
It's really cool. Oh yeah, I love that.
oh, okay, like rent.
No, you can say higher. I was trying to make you.
Yeah, I guess we might say rent, but yeah, normally I'd say higher. But
Higher's
I don't
cool.
hire anything now.
Yeah, that's.
Although, no, do you know, I hired one of the Mortal Kombat films the other day that we watched off Prime Video. I actually paid £3 something and hired it. So that was quite weird. Hey?
First one or the second one?
The first one. The first ever Mortal Kombat.
Yeah,
movie.
that one's worth paying for. The second one, not so much.
So anyway, we all had different levels of experience of Generation X. But I tell you what, I was so pumped for this because I was such a huge Generation X fan. Honestly, like I loved it as a comic. And now it'd be interesting to hear what people's thoughts are on the movie. So, Phable, actually, I'll start with you. Having watched this, did you watch it originally, or is this your first viewing? And what your summary of your thoughts on it?
No, I watched this back in the days. I remember I watched it. I just don't remember it. I don't remember any details from it. But yeah, I watched it this time around, and I mean, was like Batman Forever or something out at this point? Was that a thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's come out. Yeah.
Yeah, this has Joel Schumacher, Batman Forever, Batman and Robin
Yeah,
vibe all over it, which is very 90s. You know, it's got the camera angles pointing up, the weird color lighting that just don't make sense in the rooms that they're in. So that struck me right away, and I felt like I knew I was gonna watch something bad, but at the same time, at the end of it, I didn't hate it at all. It was weird in some places, of course, and some things didn't age as well. It wasn't a bad little story.
Yeah.
Batman Forever came out the year before in 1995. So yeah, I can see what you mean. It had that 90s style about it.
Mm-hmm.
That scene behind you, Mark, in particular, when Buff walks out in the costume at the end, that definitely was reminiscent of like Batman Forever or Batman and Robin when they're like putting on the suit, they walk out on pose real quick. You know, it definitely had Schumacher vibes.
Yeah, you got a red light over here, you got a green light over here, but we're in an office.
Right.
So it doesn't make sense.
You know, when that scene happened right at the end, she walks out, and I love how like Banshee and Emma Frost are standing like symmetrical behind her. It was all real. I know, like you say, Batman. It was very superhero cheese of the 90s, the flashiness, and not like now where it would take probably 2 or 3 movies before they even get their costume or something.
Yeah, it felt like they were definitely cashing in on that aesthetic. It must have been a hot aesthetic. At least what the producers felt superhero stuff should feel like. You know what I mean? Like that should feel like that Batman movie.
Yeah.
All the kids love it. All the kids love it. And all the kids are like, no, we don't love it. We don't love it.
Something I'm curious about is I'm curious if this is the first Marvel live action property that had that Marvel comic book intro where it's like flipping through pages and it says like Marvel on it. Like I was shocked to see that on this. You know, I thought that was maybe started with maybe X-Men, the original X-Men movie. But
I thought Elektra was the first one to have that. I didn't remember seeing that on the intro. I was not paying attention at the beginning of this film. I'm going to be real honest with you. I don't know what happened in the first. But no, I didn't. I'll have to go back and look again because I missed that if that was the case.
Yeah, I did see that flipping thing. And I went onto YouTube as well where they showed somebody's recording of the night. There was people like in Mardi Gras or something and shouting out like on Fox Tuesday night, the Tuesday night movie or whatever is Generation X. Yeah, I do remember something about the flipping, but yeah, no, I didn't realize it went back that far as well to 1996.
I wonder. See, now you got me wondering. It was because I saw there's 2 different versions on YouTube. There's one that's just like a straight movie, and then there's one that it's like the cartoons with Mardi Gras. That Jimmy Kimmel is a host of that. But I saw both of those. Now I'm not sure if it was on both versions. Like it almost feels like it could have been something someone fan edited into it. You know?
I don't remember. Like when the version that I watched when it opened, it was like some kind of galaxy, which was like the production company first, and then it just popped up on screen with mutants. Blah blah blah.
Okay, yeah.
I didn't have an intro at all on mine.
There is a couple of versions on YouTube, so yeah. I did check out a couple just to make sure I was getting the right one. So yeah. Anyway, Link, what's your summary of your thoughts on the movie?
It's bad.
His boy Chamber, he was disappointed.
I was. You know, the coolest, the only dude I wanted to see, and he's nowhere to be. We couldn't even get Cyclops right. Like once again, he's Diet Cyclops. It's bad, but it's almost so bad it's good. Almost. It follows that line. There are some cool takeaways from this, you know, like the mansion. Clearly the mansion worked and they implemented that in a few more X-Men movies. I find and so in the first 2 X-Men movies, or the Bryan Singer X-Men movies, he would always kind of start off with Patrick Stewart talking about what mutation is. And they kind of had this in this movie with the whole subtext of the definition, you know. So I thought that was cool. That's something that clearly worked. They got that from this and just evolved the idea of it or the execution. But it's bad in a lot of ways. But I feel like if you're an X-Men fan or a Generation X fan, this is something you gotta see just to be like, man, that actually happened. Like, you know, we were at that point at one point in time where it's like this, we had to go that low. It was a learning thing, bro. You know, they definitely learned from this. Cause I will say this. I give it credit because while I love the original X-Men movies, debatably they're the Wolverine in the game, you know, like he's the star of the show. And that's why I love First Class. Like I'm fond of that particular X-Men movie because it, you know, if you're a moviegoer and you've only ever seen the X-Men movies, you would think what Wolverine is a prominent character. He's not the soul of the X-Men. You know, the X-Men can function without Wolverine being in the team lineup. First Class did that well. And Generation X did that subpar. The idea they didn't do well, but this idea, like they focused.
He can't give it credit.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm about to, but nah, it doesn't sound right.
I thought about that. But they were going for something, and I respect that. You know, the execution was so off. But they attempted something, they made something, and for better or worse, you know, they inspired certain. It's like there were certain things that obviously worked in this film because they carried on into other films, but for everything that worked, there were like 5 things that didn't work. But I didn't hate it. Yeah, like I was said earlier, I didn't hate it. Like this is a movie that you like. I was like my uncle when he was watching this with me when I was like 8 years old. I was my uncle. I was like, oh my god, like what is going on? It's, you know, it's almost fun in that aspect. So it's so bad it's good. You know, it's not terrible, but it's worth checking out.
Yeah.
I'm going to disagree with you. I think it's terrible. I think it's an absolutely terrible film. But again, like I had no connection to it. So I'm watching it for the very first time in 2024. Nothing about this movie holds up. Nothing about this movie aged well. Nothing. I mean, absolutely nothing works this day and age.
That's why really hard. X-Men fan or Generation X fan, you'll probably appreciate this. But yeah, as someone who's just watching this as a film, I could easily see in this being the worst.
Yeah. And it was like only because I was familiar with Emma Frost and Jubilee, but like none of it was, it all felt so, I don't know. It felt like somebody sat down and was like, okay, what is popular right now in 1996? Yeah. And they literally took a piece of everything else that was popular in 96 and mashed it into this film. Like that whole arcade scene, 100% they took that from Terminator 2, 100%. That entire arcade sequence was right out of Terminator 2. Like the scene in the diner with the banana split, I mean, that's from 10 years before. That was from Back to the Future. Like you're just taking popular pieces from other popular films and putting them together to make this one film. And it was just, everything felt disjointed. You don't have any time to get to know these characters. Like, most of them are not likable. And it was just like, and Mark's favorite, like the villain is just so cheesy and over the top. Now I love the villain.
There you go. That's another copy, right? Like Jim Carrey. Who can we get that acts like Jim
Carrey? Exactly.
Right here.
Right.
A for effort for the product placement, bro, because I feel like Michael Bay learned a thing or two from this movie because they were making Virtual Fighter like nothing.
Sega sponsored this one, I think.
Fighter, Jubilee's in the arcade playing Virtual Fighter. Like that game was mentioned so many times. Sega was mentioned so many times throughout that movie.
Sega put $2 million. That was Sega. That was Sega, because he said we made Virtual Fighter, so that was Sega. They were working.
Well, they've come a long way because Sonic is so much better. They learned from all of their mistakes at the very least.
Well, that's probably where they got most of their funding from for this movie.
Yeah.
I can't, you know, I did watch this back in the day, and I remember being really disappointed going into it. I was so hyped because Generation X was like my favorite book back then. And I was like, they're making a movie? I was like, damn. And I come in, and I because obviously the internet wasn't a thing, so I didn't know that you know, most of the cast wasn't going to make it to the movie, and I was like, who the f are these people? Like, and I don't know, I was disappointed with a lot of it, if I'm honest. But Chamber and Husk are like my two favorite like Generation X characters, and I would say Husk is my favorite Generation X character from the comics. How cool is her power that she like grabs her hair, rips off her skin, and underneath it is something new, like I don't know whether that's a metal body or a wooden body, or I know in the Age of Apocalypse they played with that a little bit, and she could change her like molecules. I think it was into like water or steam or something or other. But what a cool power to have! And I know you could say she could shapeshift. It's basically a shapeshifting thing, but she has something disgusting that she rips her skin off. And I just think that's a pretty.
I was gonna say that it's kind of disgusting, just a little bit.
It's disgusting that you have to rip off the original skin that's on to get a new thing, but that is a unique twist, I think. So anyway, in regards to this movie, I hate the villain with a proper passion. I can't stand him as an actor. I honestly hate him in pretty much anything that he's in. And honestly, really not for me, that guy.
It's the fan. I almost is the only actor who knows what movie he's in.
Yeah.
Oh no, don't get me wrong. He played Jim. He was literally Jim Carrey's
Riddler.
That's Max Headroom too, man. Let's not forget.
I know what he's in. I know the things that he's in, but he just is not. I don't find him funny.
I love him. I love him in Supernatural. He plays one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, and he's fantastic as Pestilence.
Pestilence, yeah. Yeah. Great season.
Look, actually, rewatching this movie, because I know we've all been joking about it in our back chat about how crap this movie is. But when I rewatched it, I thought, actually, do you know what? It's not as bad. It's a terrible film, don't get me wrong, but it's not as bad as I remember it being. I hated the villain. But there was some things in here that I thought I'm okay with these things, like the classroom scenes and actually seeing like the school environment, and you can see, like Lynk said, some of the early groundwork that was laid for the X-Men movies. Bryan Singer clearly lifted a lot from this movie,
right,
to make his own movie, which is crazy. It just reminds me so much of the history of what we saw in the Fantastic Four films.
Yep.
It makes me think, oh wow, they've gone and done the same stuff again, made a crappy little movie, but different reasons behind it. But a lot of the architecture of this movie was handed over to a bigger budget, Fox movie that got released in the cinemas and had a 70 million increase in budget. But no, look, it's a. Do you know what actually reminded me of? I think the CW would actually put something like this out now.
Yes.
I think the CW would have no issues releasing something like this now. I don't think the world has changed that much that some people still think this kind of content is acceptable. But in a summary, it's not a good movie. However, as a fan of Generation X, I just think it's fantastic that we did get this movie, because I just was thinking about it. It's crazy to me that the first ever live action movie was lifted from, teenage youth mutants, and that's very uncommon. It's normally that they go to safe brands. Like Marvel has said right now that they're only going to go with their safe brands, where they've been experimenting a little bit. In 2024, they're going to pull away from that and just stick with their prime brands. It's cool to see a concept like this get a release. Whilst it wasn't successful, it didn't land as well as the studios would have liked. But there are parts of it that are enjoyable. As I sort of will go through a little bit more, but just quickly, characters. There's a lot in here, but just purely talking about the movie now. Has anyone got a favorite movie character? Like Lynk, what about you? Have you got a favorite movie character?
You had me think. I will say that the Mondo Diet Cyclops friendship in the movie was what is his name? I'm never gonna call him that, but I really don't know his name. Diet Cyclops.
Refrax.
Refrax.
Kurt or Refrax.
Diet Cyclops is so much better.
Diet Cyclops, we'll go with that. But their friendship was reminiscent of Cannonball and Sunspot, Sam and Bobby from the New Mutants, which I think is one of the best friendships in all of comicdom. So it was cool to see that. They were both douchebags, but I really think Skin was probably the most. He probably had the most meat in the script. I feel like he was almost the main character, like him and Jubilee. But Jubilee, the actress, was weak. Mondo or the villain, I would say, were my favorite characters in this movie. You know, in terms of me liking the actor, I just, for the bad guy, I just felt he knew what type of movie he was in and he acted accordingly. Skin was just, I feel like, the most grounded character. Like, you know, you saw he came from a family that loved him and stuff. He didn't, you know, was in a bad neighborhood. He didn't want to leave him. Like, he just felt a little bit more relatable as opposed to like Buff Monet Saint. Is it Monet Saint Croix or Saint Croix?
Yeah, yeah.
She in a few scenes, like she just popped up to give some explanation for her stuff a lot of the times. Buff as well. Mondo and his Diet Cyclops were only ever being douchebags. So, you know, there was only so many good picks of people you could really relate to. You know, like Jasmine said, they didn't really do much with the characters in this. They were just kind of there. People were just there. But so if we're going based off the strength of a character arc, I would say Skin.
Mm-hmm.
Performance-wise, villain.
What about you, Phable?
Yeah, I'd probably have to go with the villain as well. I think he gave you know, he gave it his all. You know, he was all in it. He was physically in it. He was doing his best bit. You know, his best Jim Carrey bit. Mm-hmm. But like Link said, it's kind of tough to figure out. You know, because he's right. There is one of the weaknesses of this movie. Because like I said, I didn't hate it, right. But a weakness of it is that there's no team in this Generation X team.
Yep. Yep.
Right, there's never a team moment. They never try to be cohesive or learn from each other. You know, you got to put that Breakfast Club vibe in these kind of movies if they're meeting each other for the first time and they're all different. Sure, they could be dickheads to each other in the beginning, but at the end, it should be a brotherhood.
Yep.
And, you know, and you don't get that at all in this shit. Yeah.
They tried with the whole like, oh, Mondo, you're expelled. Well, if you expel him, you got to expel me too. Like, then everybody gets expelled. Yeah. But like, it just didn't hit. It didn't. It's
unearned. It's unearned. Yeah. They didn't earn it. So, yeah, I agree with Link. It's hard to pick somebody, but if I'll pick Banshee. I'll highlight Banshee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, I think he was true to his character the whole time. Even though I don't know how good that accent was. Mark, you could tell me if that accent was any good.
He was trying.
But yeah, I think I like Banshee in this.
What about you, Jasmine?
I gotta go with the villain. Like, he cracked me up. I've always liked that actor. And so like when I saw his face, I was like, oh, okay, then it was almost like I knew now what I was getting myself into when I realized that he was in it, because he plays the same character in everything that he does. Like this is what you get from him when you hire him, no matter what the film is. But I love that if we're gonna go cheesy, like I love the balls to the wall, over the top, just absolutely ridiculous villain. And you threw him in a red suit at the end. Like, it was just like everything about him was just like so out there. And I was like, yes, I'm all in on your ridiculousness. So
I'm not gonna hold you up. Like that confused me. I was like, so is he supposed to be Magneto? Like I was so lost as a kid with this.
No, he's the mask. He's the mask. You know how the mask wears those big zoot suits? He was wearing a mask.
Suits. Yeah. Oh my God, the zoot suits.
Oh, we gotta the class.
I kind of want to. I think for me, the Skin Angelo. I love that we got to see the background there before he came to. Well, I know we saw a bit of background with Jubilee as well, but as a comic book fan, I loved that we sometimes dig into the past of Angelo. I can't quite remember now the stories from the comics, but I remember there being something about him hiding a gun in the mansion or something. I can't quite exactly remember, but I remember there was like some mystery with Angelo in the comics of what may have happened before he came to live at the mansion. When we saw him before he came to the mansion in the film, I was like, like this is cool. It reminds me a little bit of from the book, and I love that we got to flesh it out a little bit. And his powers were the most visual in the books, the movie as well. And whilst the budget was really thin on the ground, the powers were quite weak that they showed. His was the one that I felt put a little bit more work in, and as an actor, they gave him a little bit more room to breathe. But the person I actually do want to go with, and Phable showed it out already, was Banshee. I thought the banter between him and Emma Frost was very similar to what we had in the comics, and I thought they put a lot into the relationship between the two of them. Because as a Generation X comic book fan, they constantly were at each other in terms of how to manage the children. Because he came from a much more heroic background, where she was a former villain, and her managing her children in the comics was always a lot more brutal, and you could feel that in the movie. I thought both actors did well, but for me, Banshee was my favorite character. I think I enjoyed how he handled the role of Banshee, and I love that little bit where he hits them with his sound waves, and he has the little gun moment and like holds it was cheap. Don't get me wrong, but I thought that was good. I liked it. So
can I ask you a question? Since you're such a fan, does that when skin stretches, does it hurt him? Because it looked like he was in some pain every time.
I don't remember it hurting him. I don't remember it hurting him for the comics.
See, so I remember reading that like sometimes it causes him discomfort because people kind of assume he's like a Mr. Fantastic, but Mr. Fantastic is literally stretching his limbs, skin just stretching his skin, it's that because remember when he first showed up, he was looking like an old man and stuff because he didn't have a grasp of powers, and he had like the droopy face and stuff.
Yeah, I remember that. He had like a grey, droopy face. Like
I ever hurts him, but I know that it caused him discomfort at certain points.
I don't remember it hurting him, but maybe it's discomfort. But yeah, so he wasn't like Mr. Fantastic who could stretch his limbs. I do remember it was just the skin. So I assume the bones stayed.
You know what this got me thinking is this movie tried to establish itself on its own in a lot of ways, but at the same time it was like making a lot of callbacks to X-Men canon or history, I guess you could say. Like, because Sean, like you were saying, like the Sean and Emma banter that, she did, he did address her about that. He's like, I know you lost the Hellions. Yeah, there's old man.
So this on the video here, that's what Skin would look like in the comics.
Yep.
He looks like Solomon Grundy.
Yeah, like, that's it. That's in there.
Well, very malnourished person. But no, they made reference to Emma leading the Hellions.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly there was like they were trying to call back to ties to previous X-Men history. At the same time, it made me wonder, like, why couldn't you have gone the extra effort and had Buff been like, yeah, my brother he was a previous student from here, because her brother's Cannonball, and he's like Cyclops of the young class. Like, he always wanted to be an X-Men. He wanted to be the best. He followed Xavier. So it's like she was like, that's a pretty big pool. As her, she's kind of like, your brother's Cannonball. Oh shit, yeah. But they didn't even allude to that, which I don't know. I just thought it was like somewhat like, so it made me feel like, why are you guys referencing the Hellions when the average viewer is not going to know the context of that, Like, yeah, she lost some previous students, but I don't know. It was just weird how they pick and chose, like, we're going to acknowledge that, there is some kind of pre-lore or history here.
Mm-hmm.
Time these are the first students that we're training for with powers. It was weird.
I do that whole what we're talking about, that whole mention of her mentioning the Hellions in the movie, and then no background given, no follow-up later in the movie. I thought, well, I get it because I know what happened, but like someone like Jasmine,
nope.
Or even Phable,
I know the name Hellions, but I don't know the history behind them or anything. But I'm assuming they did that because originally this was meant to be a pilot that led into a series, and so they dropped a whole bunch of little Easter eggs because they were expecting this to become a full-on series.
Right.
Yeah.
So that could be why there was all those little unpulled threads that were kind of left dangling.
I suppose I think that's fair because if you were making I don't know what this would have been back then, 22 episode season or something or other.
Yeah, it would have been.
You'd have to really drag that out to the final episode, so you would have a whole Emma Frost episode around the Hellions or something like that. And yeah, so but right, just quickly before as we come towards our end, but what do we all think about the plot on this movie? So,
What plot?
I want to hear what Fable's got to say. What's Fable got to say about the plot?
It's weird. It's a little strange. But I didn't hate it. I didn't hate it. I gotta admit, I didn't hate it. Guy basically that invents a way to tap into dreams so he could subliminally drop thoughts in your mind so he can sell products.
Yeah.
Right?
Capitalism at its best, right?
Right, exactly. And he needs a mutant in order to make this happen. So it's not a terrible story. Sounds like something that might happen in a comic book.
Yeah.
So it wasn't terrible. It's just, dialogue, acting, some core themes that you need for, this team to work. Things like that were missing. But I mean, I didn't think the premise was terrible at all.
That's fair.
I wonder what they could have done with a bigger budget is the question.
A lot more.
Even if you had only had like 10 million, that's 6 million more. I feel like you could have done a lot better with that money than what you did with 4.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, Lynk, what about your thoughts on the plot?
I agree with Fable. This movie is like, it's so bad it's good. I didn't hate it watching it. Like, I watched it like 3 times now in the last couple of weeks because I watched before you had mentioned it, and then I watched it again when you first were like, "Yeah, I'm doing the Generation X stream," and then I watched it again today, and I just kind of laugh at the stuff that's so bad, but there's it's just kind of cool to see what was like you were saying, Mark, what was picked up from this movie in later iterations, so like between Bryan Singer and company. Fable said it perfectly. Like, this is some shit that would clearly happen in a comic book. This is a comic book plot. Sometimes, like Bryan Singer, he took away a lot of the comic book elements that might not work well on screen or to the average viewer. And I think that's what this was lacking, where they just were kind of, like I said, they were making references. Like Jasmine brought up a good point that there's hopefully seeding plot threads for future episodes, and it never got picked up, but it's it wasn't a bad story. It seems like something Grant Morrison would do. Like, it's so kind of zany, like I could see Morrison doing something like this in printed form, but it was the execution. The acting was like watching a daytime soap opera. Some people like those, but having very cheesy and dramatic dialogue, this felt like that a little bit. Actors were very stiff.
It's like a comic book telenovela.
Yes, yeah. But there wasn't that's what worked against it. But as a plot, it really wasn't like, that's just crazy. X-Men 97 just came out over the last weekend. Not to veer too off topic, but in the episode, Cyclops is like skydiving and uses his optic blast to like stop his fall. That's more unbelievable than the plot in this movie, but it looks cooler. So, the perception goes a long way. It's like how you execute it. Mm-hmm. But no, the story isn't terrible. Like we've been saying throughout this whole, there's a lot that worked in this because there's a lot borrowed for future iterations of X-Men movies. Even just the mansion that was in Arrow and Smallville, but that says something. But no, the story isn't bad. It's bad, but it's not terrible. I'll say that.
What about you, Jasmine?
I think this is par for the time. Like, this feels very much like a 1996 movie. I mean, it works with everything else that was coming out at the time. Like, the only good comic film in this time period was Blade. That was it. Yeah. And you were coming off the heels of the bad Batman movies. We were past the Tim Burton ones, but even those are nostalgic, but they weren't that great. But like, all of the comic films of this time period were just like this film. Like, they were all
You just need some seal to play, you know,
Yes.
some seal, a little something.
Yeah, for real.
Somebody save me.
Yeah.
Something
Like
that.
they needed some help. Like this film definitely needed some help. And as far as the plot goes, like, again, very much of the time. It doesn't make very much sense, but like kind of does make sense. Like logically, the plot makes zero sense whatsoever. If you really wanted to subliminally market to people, that would not be the way to go about doing it. But
Right.
I just think like it's a product of the times. And so like if I'm looking at this film from a 96 lens, I probably would not have disliked it as much in 96 as I do now in 2024. But like it's of the time. That's all I can say. Like it's of its time period. It fits right in the time frame.
A future episode, we're gonna have to go into you talking about Tim Burton's Batman movies and being not that great.
We've already done those movies, unfortunately.
No, I love them. I love them. I absolutely love them. I really do. But like a villain riding down the street in a rubber duck, like
yeah, but Tim Burton sets you up for that shit at least.
Yes,
I mean, come on, his style is absurd, you know.
Yeah. But in regards to myself, there's parts of the movie I actually did enjoy. I hated the villain with a passion. I wish he wasn't in it. And in all honesty, I hate any movie or TV show where the plot of the episode revolves around dreams or virtual reality or whatever. I really do. Like, sometimes when you're watching an episode, and they have these episodes where the main characters are like in a dream world and they've got to escape and they're running down corridors and all that. I literally skip through those episodes or whatever. I literally skip the last 5 minutes. I hate any of those. That's why I feel like it's the writer's weakest thing they can come up with. I think I don't know. There's no originality in that plot. I do agree.
But Mark, didn't you love Fringe? Didn't Fringe revolve around stepping into all of these other things that didn't really make sense and that kind of stuff? And you love quantum. They're time jumping in that one.
No, that's not dreams or virtual reality.
Movie.
Hey,
which movie?
Inception. That's a dream movie.
That was done well. I'll give you that. That was done well. Like, that's done well. Okay. There's always an exception to things I hate.
Sure.
No, Fringe, they did do a dream thing. I think it was in the first ever episode, but the whole 5 seasons isn't like that. If that had been like that for 5 seasons, I wouldn't have watched it. But no, in the first season, she does what's her name? The lead character, the blonde detective, has to get in the tank and does go off into a dream thing. Yeah, no, if the whole show was like that, no, I wouldn't have been interested in Fringe. So what I did like though was the bit that they did well. I liked the introduction of Jubilee and Angelo to the mansion. I love the fact that we got the bit of setup, and I love like the classroom scenes and the football scenes, and I love the fact that there's banter and them not all gelling that well. I did like the cheesiness with the costume at the end. I enjoyed more the character plot work, if I'm honest, rather than the story plot work. I think that's probably the best summary I can give. And probably in terms of a favourite moment, I don't know if I'd say I had a favourite moment, but I think I just overly enjoyed the relationship between Banshee and Emma Frost. I think that was a highlight for me, just seeing the banter between the two of them. So, and then if I was to do it differently, I'd do what Jasmine said. I'd whack another 6 million at this, and I'd probably get Scott Lobdell to actually write this script rather than someone who's probably never read it.
Get a better cinematographer, man. Fire that light.
If we had another 6 million, they could have easily put in maybe a toned down version of Chamber, maybe the one from Age of Apocalypse. And you could have put Huskin. I don't see why they couldn't have done. You didn't have to have a show ripping off a skin in every scene. So Penance might have been more difficult to have done, but still would have been cool.
Look at this. Like, I feel like Sync would have been an easy character to squeeze in.
Oh, he would have been.
you could have had him just kind of emulate everyone else's powers on screen at a certain point, and that could have been like you're getting more bang for your buck in that aspect. Like who, you know, sometimes I'll see a movie and it's like it gives me hope that I could be writing a movie one day, you know? Like, because if they can do it, bro, and they can get paid for that shit story, I know I got some gold, you know, just...
I mean, Jasmine, we say this all the time. They should come
All
listen
the
to our podcast. We'll sort them out. So, right, as we come into an end, I wanted to run through, guys, other superhero films that came out in 1996, just to compare this. Now, I know this was a TV movie, but in 1996, you had The Phantom, right, which was, I think, a good film. You had The Crow, City of Angels.
Yeah.
Barbed Wire.
No.
You know, I've not seen it, but Vampirella, Darkman 3, which again I've not seen, and there's a few other really shoddy superhero films that came out that year. But for me, The Phantom was probably the best one that came out that year.
Absolutely.
I like
Billy
it.
Zane,
I mean,
brilliant.
it's cheesy, but I love that adventure feel. Like it very much felt like a Tomb Raider or an Uncharted.
Right. Yeah, I did.
I would say Generation X is better than Barbed Wire.
Yeah, I'll give you that one. Okay. I can see.
If we're going based off of visuals, my man, I don't
Same
know.
costume designer, though, I'm sure.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So what stuff?
I know I was gonna say I haven't seen Barbed Wire in a minute, but yeah, I don't know. That movie is probably really shit. I saw that as a kid.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
It was terrible.
It's
I
like
remember,
terrible,
I
like
mean-
along the lines of Barbarella terrible. Like it's terrible.
The most influential though is absolutely The Crow.
Oh,
Yes.
Oh yeah, yeah.
definitely.
I mean, even now we're still talking about it because obviously the remake that they're going to bring out. So, well, we'll start bringing it to a close, but we always like to end with the ratings. So, Phable, what would you rate this out of 5?
Ooh.
You can do it two ways. You can rate it like from 96 and you can rate it from 2024.
Ah, okay. Okay. Modern lens.
For 96, it was a 2.5.
Okay.
And for 2024, it is a 2.
Okay.
It goes
That's
down.
not that big of a drop. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't age well, but at the same time, I mean, you got to go in with some expectations. You're watching a TV movie that has a low budget. You know what I mean? You can't really ding it too much for its production value, right?
Yeah.
But the acting and the fucking just the lack of certain things bring it down, of course.
Lynk, what about you?
I'm a little bit higher than Phable. I would say 96. This was about a 3. We'll go 2.75. 2.69.
It's getting lower. It's getting lower. As he talks.
Film. This is a solid 2. I say that I think fans of X-Men and X-Men lore can appreciate this movie, but at the same time, they can realize and understand how bad this is. But there's things to take away from it and respect at the same time. But you will be confused as this is a shit movie. But there's...
I love that. This is a shit movie.
I know there's something to be said for people that can appreciate that. Like, it is okay for you to like terrible movies, but you need to acknowledge that the film is terrible. There's nothing wrong with liking a terrible movie, but like, don't come at me talking about Twilight is amazing. Twilight is an awful, horrible. But if you like it, that's great. You are more than welcome to like terrible films, but acknowledge that it's terrible. I agree.
No, but this is terrible and it's not likable, so it's okay. Don't worry.
No, do you know what? I said that the other day in the chat about Madam Web, and I was like, look, actually, I went in there with low expectations, and I walked out of there enjoying it. Like I thought, you know, it's not comparable to The Dark Knight or Inception or any other real good film that you want to think of, like Heat that I mentioned earlier. But I walked in there with an expectation this is going to be a Sony level superhero movie, and of the Sony level superhero movies, they did a good job. I thought. I'm not going to lie, it isn't amazing. It's not going to win awards, but I walked out there.
I mean, it might win some Razzies.
It might win some award. It might win some awards. Anyway,
I think that's a point to make, because I think that ties into a lot of things. Like, even I'm sitting here thinking of comics, like there'll be a shit run, and it's like, if you're paying $3.99 for a 6-issue shit run, yeah, it's bad. If you're getting it if you get all 6 issues for $6 for $1 a piece, you're gonna be like, yeah, it wasn't that bad. I paid
Right.
That's very crucial. You don't expect anything great going into this, but there's some fun.
Right? Yeah, you should know. You should know what you're getting yourself into if you're watching this.
Yeah.
Jasmine's not gonna watch this because she felt like it. Somebody told her.
Never.
Never. But a guy like me or Link, or maybe even, especially Mark, since he's a fan, he's gonna seek this shit out. He's gonna be like, I gotta watch this.
Yeah, no, I did seek this out at the time. But anyway, Jasmine, what would you rate it?
96 gets a 2.
Respect.
2024 gets a half a point.
Whoa! Bravo.
Actually, Jasmine, I want to ask a question. We joke on here about various bad films we've seen. Man-Thing, Howard the Duck, Spawn. Where would you put it?
You keep saying Spawn, but I don't put Spawn on that list.
Yeah, man. What are you doing?
I would put Spawn on that list.
Tim Robbins, bro. Come on now. I'm just saying.
Okay. Man-Thing and Howard the Duck. Where would you put it?
It's still not as bad as Man-Thing. Like, I don't think we have watched anything that has been as bad as Man-Thing. Nothing.
That was absolutely terrible.
I mean, I don't think I've honestly seen a film in general that was worse than Man-Thing. Like, it was, but for me, like, it was the racism that really made it so, like, but why? Like, this is already a bad movie. And then to top it off, you had Australians being like Southern white racist. And I'm just like, makes any sense? Like, I am so confused.
What's going on?
Yeah, what's going on? Man-Thing was terrible. Man-Thing was terrible. This is definitely not as bad as Man-Thing. But I will say, like, for the movies that are bad, I honestly feel like Venom, the first one with Tom Hardy, is a bad film, but I enjoy it. I like watching it, but arguably that first Venom is a bad movie, and then the other ones are subsequently even worse behind it. But I enjoy watching the first Venom, but I understand that this is not a good film, but I like it anyway.
Okay, so ratings wise for myself, I'll be honest, when I watched this in 1996, I was really, really disappointed because I was a huge fan back then, and first ever X-Men comic and everything. I don't know, probably 2.5, I would reckon, back then. And then when I rewatched it last night, I actually didn't hate. I feel like I hated it less now because I knew what I was going into, and I think, like Link said, I obviously saw this out back then, but my memories of it were like really down in the dumps. Now I still think the villain is awful, but I really do appreciate this more. I'm going to stick with 2.5, to be honest, but for different reasons. I think we should appreciate it sometimes when we're given something like this, because it's very rare in the comic book world that not every comic we read is going to actually make its way into any kind of screen. And are we ever going to see, an X-Force book or film, or I know we have the New Mutants movie, but are we ever going to see a proper X-Force book with Deadpool and Cable, or and everyone else? Who knows? Maybe, but I doubt it. And are we ever going to see the X Factor comic with Havoc as a leader? Probably not. So I think when these things do crop up, I think we should appreciate them. So I'll give it 2.5 for effort. So,
but I also think you have to look at it like, without this, we don't get X-Men in 2000s. Just like without that first Fantastic Four film, we don't have the version with Jessica Alba and Chris Evans. It's like they happen for a reason. Like it has to start somewhere so that everybody else in Hollywood has something else to build on. Otherwise, we don't get the actual good stuff that comes afterwards.
That's a good point. Now that you're talking about, like, I find it wild that this comic had a movie based off of it so soon after its inception.
Yeah.
You know, it came out 94, the movie came out 96. These characters beyond Jubilee, Banshee, and Emma Frost, Jubilee was probably the most popular character going into this because Emma and Banshee weren't part of, if you weren't a hardcore X-Men reader, they weren't in the 92 X-Men cartoon, so they were just as unknown as the rest of the Generation X cast. So for them to take a chance on this with not even relatively very unknown characters, I respect that in a lot of ways. You won't see that really happen nowadays. Like you were saying, Mark, like I will never see, I don't want to say never, but very slim that we'll see an X Factor film where Havoc's the leader, they're sponsored by the government. Like, so it's cool for this moment in time. Like you said, it's cool to appreciate what they did and, like saying, Jasmine, how it led to this. But at the same time, we got to understand it's a bad film. This is manage those expectations. People have a good time going into this. If not, you'll feel like you've wasted your time. With an hour and 38 minutes, you will never get back. But
if that chick showing up with the red costume and the way the X gleamed at the end doesn't tell you everything you need to know.
that X shining thing, I thought, I wish they'd make that stop. That was so unnecessary. But I thought it felt a bit like the Power Rangers movie, where they all do something like a flashlight or something. I was like, what is going on? So, right, okay. So we're going to bring this episode to a close. Lynk, Phable, thanks for joining us. This is the first part of our many X-Men movie reviews that we're now kicking off. Next episode, we will be jumping forward to the next live action film, which is X-Men from the year 2000. You can follow us on social media. We're everywhere: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, X, whatever. Guys, where can they find you? Link, where are you online?
Missing Link comics _ comics on IG. Just post more stuff.
And Phable, what about yourself?
One Collection Down on Instagram, also One Collection Down on YouTube, man. Catch us, man. Yeah, sub up.
Also, give them guys a follow. And over to you, Jasmine.
And then you can get this podcast wherever you get your podcast: Google, Podbean, Apple, Spotify. We are everywhere. So please leave us a 5-star review and tell your geeky friends.
Oh, yeah.
Bye.
Good journey.